Beneath the shifting sands of Egypt, inside forgotten tombs of the Maya, and within the sacred mounds of ancient Europe lie secrets that have puzzled archaeologists for centuries. The way a society buries its dead reveals far more than just funeral customs. It uncovers deep beliefs about the afterlife, social hierarchy, and even cosmic connections. From mummified remains surrounded by golden treasures to skeletons arranged in celestial patterns, ancient burial rites tell stories that words never could. Today, we'll explore 25 of the most mysterious funeral practices from lost civilizations, rituals so strange, so elaborate, they blur the line between the living and the dead. Why did the Vikings send chieftains to sea in burning ships? What compelled the Chinchorro people to mummify their dead thousands of years before the Egyptians? And what eerie purpose lay behind the Tibetan practice of sky burials? These weren't just ceremonies, they were bridges to another world. Of all the ancient burial practices, none capture the imagination quite like Egyptian mummification, a meticulous, months-long ritual to preserve the body for eternity. This wasn't just about stopping decay, it was a sacred act ensuring the deceased could navigate the afterlife. Skilled embalmers began by carefully removing the brain through the nose using hooked tools, believing it was useless in the next world. The heart, however, stayed intact, considered the center of thought and identity. Other organs, like the liver and lungs, were preserved in ornate canopic jars, each protected by a different god. Then came the drying process, 40 days buried in natron salt to desiccate the body, followed by wrapping it in hundreds of yards of linen strips layered with amulets for protection. The wealthier the individual, the more elaborate the process. Pharaohs like Tutankhamun were entombed with golden masks and treasures, while commoners might receive simpler treatments. But every step had meaning, from the spells recited by priests to the final placement in the tomb, facing the rising sun. In the eyes of the ancient Egyptians, death wasn't an end, it was a carefully prepared journey. Deep within the linen wrappings of a mummy, tucked between layers of protective amulets, the ancient Egyptians often placed something even more powerful, a collection of spells known today as the Book of the Dead. Far from a single volume, these were personalized scrolls of magic, poetry, and divine guidance, meticulously prepared to help the deceased navigate the treacherous journey to the afterlife. Imagine stepping into the underworld armed with nothing but cryptic instructions, each spell a lifeline in a realm ruled by gods and monsters. Some texts warned of demonic gatekeepers, while others transformed the dead into swallows to escape danger or granted the ability to breathe air in the land of the dead. One famous spell, known as the Weighing of the Heart, contained some of the most vivid imagery, the deceased's heart placed on a scale against the feather of Mat, goddess of truth. If the heart was heavy with misdeeds, a fearsome beast called Ammit would devour it, denying eternal life. But if it balanced perfectly, the soul could enter paradise. These spells weren't just wishes, they were weapons in the ultimate test of the afterlife. Wealthy Egyptians commissioned lavishly illustrated copies, with hieroglyphs inked in precious pigments and scenes of the gods painted in gold. One stunning example, the Papyrus of Ani, stretches over 78 feet long, its spells interwoven with breathtaking art. For the ancient Egyptians, the Book of the Dead was more than a funerary text. It was a map, a shield, and a prayer all rolled into one. A fierce wind howls across the fjords as flames engulf a mighty longship. A Viking chieftain's final voyage begins not on the waves but in fire and smoke. The Norse didn't just bury their dead, they sent them to the afterlife in style, resting inside the very ships that carried them to glory in life. Picture a towering vessel dragged ashore, its hull packed with swords, shields, and treasures, while loyal thralls and horses lay sacrificed beside their master. These weren't mere graves, they were launch pads to Valhalla, Odin's hall of fallen warriors. Few discoveries bring this ritual to life like the Oseberg ship, unearthed in Norway over a century ago. Beneath a massive burial mound, archaeologists found an ornately carved vessel nearly 80 feet long, its timbers cradling the remains of two women, one likely a powerful queen or seeress. Surrounding them were sledges, tapestries, and even a cart adorned with mythical scenes, all meant to serve them in the next world. But the most haunting detail: 15 sacrificed horses and several dogs, their bones suggesting a solemn, perhaps violent send-off. For the Vikings, a ship burial wasn't just about wealth or status. It mirrored their cosmology, a belief that the dead needed transport to the afterlife, whether rowing to the misty halls of Valhalla or sailing to Hell's realm. Some ships were buried whole, like the Gokstad ship, where a warrior king lay surrounded by gaming pieces and hunting tools. Others were set ablaze, their ashes scattered at sea, symbolizing a journey without return. Either way, the message was clear. In death, as in life, a Viking's destiny was tied to the ship beneath their feet. These floating tombs remind us that for the Norse, honor didn't end at death, it sailed on. Beneath the windswept plains of Lindholm Hoge in Denmark, rows of stone-marked graves whisper a chilling truth: Viking burials weren't always a solitary affair. Here, the evidence is etched in bone: sacrificed animals, even humans, laid alongside warriors and chieftains. This wasn't random violence, but a calculated ritual, a doorway to the afterlife pried open with blood. Archaeologists uncovering these sites found skeletons of dogs, horses, and sometimes thralls, servants, or prisoners, positioned as if still serving their masters beyond death. At one grave, a decapitated man was placed at the feet of a high-status warrior, his head tucked beneath his arm. Another site revealed a woman buried with a sacrificed stallion, its legs folded beneath it like a loyal companion awaiting the next world. But why? The Norse sagas speak of Odin's Hall, Valhalla, where the chosen dead feast and fight until Ragnarök, yet reaching it required more than just a brave death. Sacrifices, or blot, were offerings to the gods, a currency for safe passage. Some scholars believe these acts mirrored royal funerals witnessed by Arab travelers, where enslaved women volunteered to join their masters, convinced of a glorious afterlife together. Others argue it was about power, a final display of a chieftain's dominance, proving his influence stretched even beyond the grave. The bones tell their own story. Isotope analysis from Lindholm Hoge reveals some sacrificed individuals weren't locals but outsiders, perhaps war captives or traded slaves. Their presence underscores a darker side of Viking honor culture, where prestige in death demanded witnesses, even unwilling ones. Yet not all sacrifices were violent. Some animals, like the horses found with bridles and saddles, seem to have been companions, entrusted to carry their owners into the next realm. For the Vikings, death was a tapestry woven with loyalty, fear, and divine bargaining. Every sacrificed life, whether human or beast, was a thread in that tapestry, a plea to the gods for favor in the unknown that lay ahead. These graves don't just hold bones, they hold conversations with the divine, frozen in time. In the heart of China's Shaanxi province lies one of history's most astonishing feats of funerary art, an entire army frozen in time, waiting silently for a battle that would never come. Discovered by farmers in 1974, the Terracotta army of Emperor Qin Shi Huang stretches across an underground complex larger than most modern cities. Thousands of life-sized clay soldiers stand in battle formation, each one painstakingly crafted with unique facial features, armor, and weapons, some even bearing traces of original paint. But these weren't just sculptures, they were a conqueror's insurance policy for the afterlife. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify China, was obsessed with immortality. When elixirs failed him, he turned to the next best thing, an eternal kingdom guarded by an army of clay. Archaeologists estimate over 8,000 warriors were buried here, alongside chariots, horses, and even acrobats to entertain the emperor in death. The scale is staggering. Pits stretch over 38 square miles, with the emperor's tomb itself still unexcavated, said to contain rivers of mercury and celestial maps on its ceiling. What makes these statues so remarkable isn't just their numbers, but their individuality. No two faces are alike, some young and eager, others grizzled with experience, as if real soldiers posed for them. Their armor reflects different ranks, from infantry to archers, and their weapons were once real, looted long ago. Even their positioning holds clues. The vanguard of archers kneels, ready to volley, while cavalry flanks the sides. This wasn't just art, it was strategy, a mirror of the military precision that forged an empire. Yet the greatest mystery lies deeper. Ancient texts claim the tomb is booby-trapped with crossbows and flooded with mercury, a metal the emperor drank in life, hoping it would grant eternal life. Modern soil tests reveal alarming mercury levels, hinting the legends might be true. For now, the heart of Qin's necropolis remains sealed, leaving us to wonder what other secrets wait in the dark, guarded by an army of clay. The terracotta warriors aren't just relics. They're a promise, an emperor's defiant stand against time itself. At the very center of this vast necropolis, hidden beneath layers of earth and legend, lies the untouched tomb of Qin Shi Huang, an archaeological enigma sealed for over 2,000 years. Ancient texts describe it as a subterranean palace, more magnificent than anything above ground, with ceilings mimicking the night sky in pearls and rivers of shimmering mercury representing China's great waterways. But entering this forbidden chamber may come at a deadly cost. Historical records warn of ingenious traps, crossbows rigged to fire automatically at intruders, pits filled with sharpened stakes, and cascades of liquid metal toxic enough to kill within moments. Even modern technology hesitates to breach it. Soil samples show mercury concentrations far exceeding natural levels, lining up eerily with the old accounts of the emperor's obsession with immortality. Some scholars speculate the mercury wasn't just a decoration but a preservation method, perhaps meant to slow decay or ward off grave robbers. Others think it symbolized his unyielding control, even in death, a ruler who commanded the very elements. But the greatest questions remain. What treasures lie beside the emperor's body? Could his infamous search for eternal life have led to experiments buried with him? Rumors speak of alchemical texts, maps of the cosmos, or even mechanical wonders lost to time. And then there's the mystery of the workers. Legend claims every craftsman who built the tomb was silenced to protect its secrets. For now, the Chinese government restricts excavation, citing both safety and respect for the dead. Yet radar scans reveal sprawling chambers and unusual metallic distributions, stoking curiosity. Perhaps one day, technology will allow us to peer inside without disturbing history's grip. Until then, Qin Shi Huang's tomb remains the ultimate locked door, a vault of untold riches, lethal ingenuity, and a legacy that refuses to fade. The peat bogs of northern Europe hold more than just water and ancient plants. They cradle some of the most hauntingly preserved human remains ever discovered. Take the Tollund man, found in Denmark in 1950, with his face so intact you could mistake him for someone sleeping. His leather cap still perched on his head, the noose around his neck a grim reminder that his death was anything but peaceful. These bog bodies, as they're called, are time capsules of a darker ritual world, where humans were offered to the wetlands in ways we're still trying to understand. What makes these finds so extraordinary is the chemistry of the bogs themselves. The acidic, oxygen-poor water tans skin like leather, preserves hair down to the last strand, and even keeps fingerprints visible centuries later. But it's not just the how of their preservation that fascinates, it's the why. Many, like Tollund man, show signs of violent deaths, slit throats, crushed skulls, or in his case, hanging. Yet their poses often suggest care, hands bound but bodies gently laid in the bog, sometimes pinned down with stakes or woven branches. Were these punishments for criminals, as Roman historians once claimed? Or sacrifices to gods of fertility and harvest? The answer might lie in the objects buried with them. Some clutched handfuls of grain, others wore ornate cloaks or amulets, clues pointing to rituals tied to the land's bounty. The Grobel man, another famous bog body, had his throat cut so deeply the wound gapes even now, yet his last meal included a special porridge made from 60 different plants. A final feast before meeting the gods. Unlike the grand tombs of pharaohs or Viking chieftains, these weren't burials meant to showcase status. The bogs were thresholds, places where the ordinary met the sacred. To the Iron Age people who left them there, these bodies might have been messages to unseen forces, wrapped in the quiet alchemy of peat and time. Today, they whisper back, offering glimpses of a world where the line between life and death was as fluid as the wetlands themselves. Among the twisted roots and murky waters of Europe's peat bogs, archaeologists have pulled more than just bodies from the depths. They've uncovered treasures deliberately left behind, each one a silent plea to forces beyond human understanding. Weapons bent beyond use, gleaming torques twisted into knots, even pots of food preserved as if freshly prepared. These weren't accidents or lost items. They were gifts carefully placed in the wetlands as part of a ritual dialogue between mortals and the divine. Take the Gundestrup cauldron, a massive silver vessel dredged from a Danish bog. Covered in intricate Celtic gods and mythical beasts, it was dismantled before being offered, perhaps a sacrifice too precious to leave whole. Elsewhere, swords like the legendary Ilurup Adal finds were snapped in half, their blades rendered useless before sinking into the water. This ritual killing of objects suggests a symbolic release, as if returning borrowed power to the earth or gods. But why bogs? To ancient peoples, these weren't just soggy patches of land. They were thresholds, places where water met earth, life met decay, and the human world brushed against the supernatural. Depositing valuables here might have been akin to mailing a package to the divine, food for hungry spirits, weapons to arm gods in unseen battles, or gold to secure favor for the next harvest. Some offerings even cluster near natural springs, hinting at connections to healing or prophecy. The most chilling finds blur the line between object and offering. At Alken in Denmark, archaeologists uncovered entire battlefields worth of weapons alongside the dismembered bones of warriors. Were these spoils of war given to the gods in thanks, or trophies from enemies discarded where no one could reclaim them? Each discovery peels back another layer of a belief system where the bog wasn't just a place, it was a living, breathing entity, hungry for both gifts and secrets. Unlike grand tombs or pyramids, these offerings weren't about status or legacy. They were transactions, raw, intimate negotiations with powers that controlled rain, war, and fate. Today, a rusted sword pulled from the peat isn't just a relic. It's a receipt from the oldest deal in history, human hope traded for divine mercy, sealed in the quiet dark of the wetlands. High in the thin air of the Tibetan plateau, where the earth meets the sky in a blur of wind and rock, the dead take flight in the most unexpected way. Unlike tombs or pyres, here the final journey begins with nothing more than a white cloth and a knife. In a practice dating back centuries, Tibetan Buddhists perform what's known as a sky burial, leaving the body exposed on sacred mountaintops for vultures to carry away piece by piece. To outsiders, it might seem startling, even harsh, but for those who follow this tradition, it's one of the most profound acts of compassion and wisdom. The ritual begins with a rogyapa, a specialized body breaker carefully preparing the deceased. With prayers and mantras ringing in the air, the body is dismembered not out of disrespect, but to make it easier for the vultures, or sky dakinis, literally celestial dancers, to fulfill their sacred role. These birds aren't scavengers in this context, they're divine messengers transporting the soul to the heavens while returning the physical form to the cycle of nature. Buddhist teachings view the body as an empty vessel after death, a temporary shell no more meaningful than a discarded robe. By offering it to the vultures, families perform a final act of generosity, or dana, giving what remains to nourish other beings. There's ecological brilliance here too. Tibet's rocky terrain and frozen ground make traditional burial difficult, while cremation requires scarce firewood. Sky burials solve both problems elegantly, turning death into sustenance rather than waste. Yet the practice carries deeper philosophy. Tibetan Buddhists believe the soul has already moved on, making elaborate preservation or grave markers unnecessary. Letting go so completely, leaving no trace behind, reflects the core teaching of impermanence. In the thin air of those peaks, where the wind erases footprints as quickly as they're made, the ritual becomes a final meditation on detachment. No monuments, no relics, just the quiet certainty that energy never disappears. It only changes form. Today, sky burials remain protected by law in Tibet, a rare continuity in a rapidly modernizing world. Visitors who witness them often describe an eerie peace in the ritual, the way sunlight glints off wings circling above, the absence of mourning in favor of quiet acceptance. It's a reminder that how we treat the dead says everything about how we understand life. Not as something to cling to, but as a gift to be returned freely, fully, without a trace. While sky burials may seem like relics of an ancient past, they remain a vibrant, living tradition in Tibet today, protected by law and wrapped in deep cultural reverence. The Chinese government officially recognizes the practice as an important part of Tibetan Buddhist heritage, even prohibiting outsiders from photographing or interfering with the ceremonies. This isn't just about privacy, it's about respecting a spiritual act that defies modern notions of death. Documentary crews and travelers occasionally glimpse these rites from a distance, but the details remain closely guarded by local communities. For Tibetans, this secrecy isn't meant to obscure, but to protect the sacred from becoming spectacle. Imagine a ritual where mourning families find solace in the circling wings of vultures, watching as their loved one's physical form returns to the cycle of life. It's a moment of intimacy, not performance, yet the practice faces modern challenges. Conservation laws protecting vultures whose populations have plummeted due to habitat loss sometimes clash with the need for these birds in sky burials. Communities have adapted, with some areas establishing designated feeding grounds to sustain the flocks. Even science has taken interest. Researchers note how the ritual prevents soil contamination in high-altitude regions where burial or cremation pose environmental hurdles. What emerges is a striking balance between tradition and today's world. A rite that survives not as a museum piece, but as a practical, philosophical response to mortality. For Tibetans, it's a reminder that death need not leave a mark on the earth to leave one on the soul. And for outsiders peering in, it offers something rarer still, a glimpse of a culture that has mastered the art of letting go. Beneath the bustling streets of Paris, where tourists flock to cafes and museums, lies a hidden city of the dead, a labyrinth of tunnels stacked floor to ceiling with bones. The catacombs of Paris aren't just a burial site, they're an underground empire of skeletons carefully arranged into walls of skulls and arches of femurs. 6 million bodies call these tunnels home, creating one of the most hauntingly beautiful necropolises in history. But how did this eerie masterpiece come to be? The story begins with overcrowded cemeteries in the late 1700s, graveyards so packed that decomposing remains seeped into basements and contaminated water supplies. Something had to give. The solution: emptying Paris's cemeteries and repurposing the abandoned limestone quarries beneath the city. Night after night, horse-drawn carts carried bones through secret routes, unloading their grim cargo into the darkness. What followed wasn't just storage, it was artistry. Workers meticulously sorted and stacked skulls and long bones into macabre patterns, transforming chaos into something unsettlingly serene. Walking these shadowy corridors today, you'll pass inscriptions carved into the rock, poetic reminders like, "Stop, this is the empire of death." Some galleries bear whimsical flourishes, a heart-shaped arrangement of tibias or a barrel vault made entirely of pelvises. Yet the catacombs aren't just a tourist attraction. They're a mirror of Parisian history, reflecting everything from ancient Roman quarries to the French resistance fighters who hid in these tunnels during World War II. What makes this ossuary unique isn't just the scale, but the intention behind it. Unlike hidden tombs or sealed burial chambers, the catacombs were designed to be seen, even celebrated, a reminder of mortality turned into something strangely communal. Among the millions of anonymous skeletons, you'll find the remains of revolutionaries, philosophers, and ordinary citizens, all equalized by time. Down here, death isn't feared. It's curated, whispered about, even revered. The catacombs of Paris don't just hold bones, they hold the city's shadow self, patiently waiting beneath the light. Beneath the flicker of torchlight, where skulls stare blankly from endless walls, the Paris catacombs have long been more than just a resting place for bones, they've been a stage for the forbidden. While tour groups shuffle through the approved passages, hidden chambers deeper in the tunnels whisper of secret gatherings where masked figures once danced among the dead. This underground labyrinth, with its twisting corridors and uncharted voids, became the perfect hideaway for those who craved the thrill of the illicit. Some of the most persistent legends speak of 18th-century aristocrats hosting macabre dinner parties in the catacombs, their laughter echoing off walls lined with femurs. One account describes a banquet table set directly atop human remains, with guests toasting to mortality while sipping wine from skull-shaped goblets. Whether these stories are embellished or not, they reveal a timeless fascination with flirting with death, turning fear into fascination. But not all secrets were playful. In the 19th century, rumors swirled of occultists performing rituals in the catacombs' deepest recesses. Symbols carved into the rock, far from public routes, hint at ceremonies meant to commune with spirits or summon forces best left undisturbed. Police records from the 1890s even detail raids on clandestine meetings, where cryptic altars were found arranged with bones and candles. Some say these were mere theatrics, while others believe practitioners sought the catacombs' unique energy, a place where 6 million souls might amplify their calls into the void. The most modern legends are just as eerie. Urban explorers tell of stumbling upon freshly extinguished candles, cryptic notes pinned to ribcage, or even shadowy figures vanishing around corners. Authorities have sealed off miles of tunnels to deter trespassers, yet the allure persists. For some, the catacombs aren't just a monument to the dead, they're a living, breathing entity, pulsing with the echoes of every secret ever whispered in its depths. What makes these tales so compelling isn't just their mystery, but the catacombs' uncanny ability to reflect our deepest fascinations back at us. In a space where death is so meticulously organized, rebellion feels inevitable, whether through a decadent feast, an occult rite, or simply the act of slipping beyond the boundaries of the known. The bones may be silent, but the stories they inspire are anything but. In the mist-shrouded highlands of Papua New Guinea, the Anga people have maintained a relationship with death unlike any other, one where ancestors never truly leave. Here, in hidden caves that cling to cliffsides, the dead remain seated upright, their bodies preserved through smoke and sacred rituals, watching over their descendants with sunken, empty eyes. These aren't relics of a forgotten past, but active participants in village life. Mummified elders consulted for guidance, wisdom, and even settling disputes. The process begins with an elaborate smoking ritual. After death, the body is carefully placed over a smoldering fire, the heat and resinous smoke slowly drying the flesh while preventing decay. For months, the community tends to this transformation, turning a corpse into something durable, even lifelike. Once complete, the mummy is adorned with clay and pigments, its face painted to mimic the vibrant expressions of life, then carried to a cliffside cave, a place both hidden and honored. But the true marvel lies in how these ancestors remain woven into daily existence. When drought threatens crops or conflict arises, villagers climb to the caves, sitting beside their leathery forebears to seek counsel. Some mummies are dressed in fresh clothing, others have their hair often replaced with plant fibers rebraided by descendants. The Anga believe these ancestors retain their personalities, offering not just generic advice but distinct voices shaped by who they were in life. A warrior might be consulted before battle, a healer during illness, a storyteller to resolve generational disputes. This practice blurs the line between past and present in ways that unsettle outsiders but make perfect sense to the Anga. Why bury your dead when they can still speak? Why relegate wisdom to memory when it can sit preserved, watching over the living? In these caves, death isn't an ending, it's a continuation, a dialogue that spans centuries. The mummies of Papua New Guinea challenge everything we assume about mortality, proving that sometimes the past isn't just remembered, it's kept alive. The Anga people's method of smoke mummification is a masterclass in patience and precision, far removed from the embalming practices of ancient Egypt or the ice-preserved bodies of the Andes. Here, preservation begins with fire, but not just any fire. The body is suspended above a slow, smoldering flame fed with specific resins and woods, their smoke acting as both a drying agent and a natural antiseptic. Unlike the Egyptian approach of removing organs, the Anga leave the body entirely intact, allowing the smoke to penetrate and cure the flesh from the inside out. It's a months-long vigil, requiring constant attention to ensure the heat never grows too intense, just enough to dehydrate the tissues without burning them. The result, a leathery, almost statue-like figure that retains startlingly human features, down to the wrinkles and expressions worn in life. What sets this practice apart isn't just the technique, but the sacred intimacy of the process. While Egyptian mummification was performed by specialized priests in designated workshops, the Anga's smoke mummification is a communal act. Family members take turns tending the fire, singing to the deceased, and even speaking to them as if they were merely sleeping. There's no separation between the living and the dead during this liminal period, only a shared space where the boundary between worlds grows thin. Once fully preserved, the body is coated with a mixture of clay and ochre, both to protect the skin and to restore a lifelike appearance. The final touch, eyes made of seeds or shells, giving the ancestor a watchful, knowing gaze. Contrast this with other mummification methods. In Egypt, bodies were stripped of moisture using natron salt, then wrapped tightly to maintain their shape. The Chinchorro of Chile, who predated the Egyptians by millennia, removed the skin entirely, reinforced bones with sticks, and reassembled the body like a sculptural homage. But the Anga's approach embraces imperfection. Smoke darkens the skin, fingers may curl from the heat, and the posture settles naturally rather than being forced. These aren't idealized versions of the dead, they're raw, real, and unmistakably human. Perhaps the most striking difference lies in purpose. While pharaohs were mummified to navigate the afterlife, the Anga's ancestors remain firmly rooted in this one. Their presence isn't symbolic, it's practical. A mummified elder might attend village meetings, their input sought through divination. Some are even carried during ceremonies, their physical weight a reminder of the burdens and wisdom they still bear. In this way, smoke mummification isn't about sealing the past away, it's about keeping the conversation alive, one slow burning fire at a time. High atop isolated hills near Mumbai and Yazd, circular stone platforms rise like open-air temples, silent, solemn, and reserved solely for the dead. These are the towers of silence, sacred structures where Zoroastrians practice one of the most ecologically profound funeral rites ever devised. Bodies are carefully carried to these elevated stone rings, then left exposed to the elements, not abandoned but purposefully offered to the skies. Here, vultures and carrion birds descend as part of a sacred cycle, stripping flesh from bone within hours in a ritual as old as the faith itself. To understand this practice, we must step into the Zoroastrian worldview where earth, fire, and water are sacred, too pure to be tainted by decomposition. Corpses are considered the ultimate source of contamination, and burial or cremation would pollute the very elements revered as divine. The Towers of Silence elegantly solve this dilemma. By placing bodies atop these platforms, the community ensures nature's clean-up crew birds efficiently return organic matter to the ecosystem without harming the land below. The sun bleaches the remaining bones, which are later collected and dissolved in lime pits, completing the process with zero waste. Historically, these towers were engineering marvels. Their concentric rings separated men, women, and children, while angled pavements directed rainwater inward to cleanse the stone. A team of pallbearers called nusisalas handled the deceased with utmost care, chanting prayers to guide the soul while protecting the living from impurity. The practice reflects Zoroastrianism's core tenet: death isn't an end but a transformation, a return to the cosmic order without disturbing the balance of creation. Yet modern challenges have reshaped the ritual. India's vulture population, decimated by pesticides in the late 20th century, can no longer keep pace with the needs of Mumbai's Parsi community. Solar concentrators now assist in decomposition, blending ancient tradition with innovation. Despite these changes, the Towers of Silence endure, a testament to a faith that views death not as a defilement, but as a final act of harmony with the natural world. In these quiet circles of stone, the mortal body becomes something greater, a gift to the sky, a whisper to the wind, and a lesson in letting the earth remain unbroken. For centuries, the Towers of Silence stood unchallenged, a perfect union of faith and ecology. But in recent decades, these ancient burial grounds have faced challenges their architects never imagined. Urban sprawl creeps closer to the once isolated hills, shrinking the buffer zones that kept these sacred spaces undisturbed. Even more pressing, a silent crisis in the skies above. By the late 20th century, India's vulture population had collapsed by over 99%, victims of a veterinary drug called diclofenac, which poisoned the birds when they fed on treated livestock. Suddenly, the ritual that relied on nature's swift efficiency began to falter. Corpses that once vanished within hours now lingered for days, even weeks, under the scorching sun. Faced with this crisis, Zoroastrian communities refused to let tradition fade. Some turned to technology, installing solar concentrators, giant mirrors that focus sunlight to accelerate decomposition when birds are scarce. Others experimented with specially bred captive vultures, though the scale needed makes this solution rare. In Iran, where Zoroastrians are a minority, shrinking land availability led to the construction of rooftop towers of silence in cities like Yazd, blending modern architecture with ancient practice. Yet even these adaptations spark debate. Purists argue that without vultures, the ritual loses its essence, the sacred intermediary between earth and sky. Reformers counter that survival sometimes demands reinvention, so long as the core principle remains, honoring creation by refusing to poison it with decay. The struggle mirrors a larger tension between tradition and change. Mumbai's Parsis, already a dwindling community, now weighed difficult choices whether to modify rites passed down for millennia or risk losing them entirely. Younger generations raised in bustling cities sometimes view the towers with ambivalence, while elders cling to their symbolic power. Still, the Towers of Silence endure if in altered form. Their lesson resonates beyond any single faith, that how we treat our dead reflects how we value the living world. Whether by wing or by mirror, the heart of the ritual remains a final act of reverence, ensuring death nourishes life without leaving a wound. On the tropical islands of the Philippines, nestled within labyrinthine cave systems like Manunggal, ancient burial jars tell a story older than written history. These aren't ordinary containers, they're masterpieces of clay and symbolism, some towering nearly 4 feet tall, each one a vessel for both the physical remains and the spiritual journey of the departed. The most striking feature, elaborate carvings of boats with souls as passengers, their tiny figures huddled beneath curved prows, forever sailing toward the afterlife. Archaeologists excavating these caves have uncovered jars designed with astonishing artistry. Some lids depict human faces with eyes wide open, as if witnessing the transition between worlds. Others feature intricate geometric patterns etched with tools made from shell or stone. The Manungol jar, perhaps the most famous, shows two spirit figures paddling a canoe, an unmistakable metaphor for the soul's voyage across cosmic waters. For prehistoric Filipinos, death wasn't an end but a crossing, and these jars served as sacred canoes to navigate the unseen currents of the afterlife. What makes these burials even more fascinating is their diversity. Some jars cradle fetal positioned skeletons, carefully arranged to mirror the posture of rebirth. Others contain only fragments of bone, suggesting secondary burials where remains were collected after exposure to the elements. Many were buried with grave goods, shell bracelets, beads, even miniature pottery, essentially packing supplies for the next world. The choice of caves wasn't random either. These were portals to the underworld in indigenous belief, places where the veil between realms grew thin. Today, these jars challenge our assumptions about ancient societies. Their sophistication hints at complex spiritual beliefs and trade networks, clay sources traced to distant islands, designs echoing motifs from neighboring cultures. Unlike the pyramids or megaliths of other civilizations, these funerary jars whisper rather than shout, their beauty lying in intimate details rather than monumental scale. Each one is a silent prayer molded in clay, a testament to the universal human need to send our loved ones off with both hands, one holding grief, the other hope. These mysterious burial jars didn't exist in isolation. They were part of a vast, interconnected world of seafaring cultures that stretched across Southeast Asia thousands of years ago. Archaeologists have found strikingly similar funeral vessels scattered from the Philippines to Vietnam, Indonesia, and even as far as the Solomon Islands, each one echoing the same maritime symbolism. It's as if entire civilizations shared a spiritual language written not in words but in clay and sea winds. The recurring boat motifs tell a deeper story. For ancient island societies, the ocean wasn't just a resource, it was a highway, a provider, and a metaphorical bridge between worlds. Trading networks flourished long before written history, with pottery styles, shell jewelry, and even burial customs traveling as far as the cargo they carried. A jar discovered in Borneo might mirror the carvings of one found in Palawan, suggesting a shared belief that souls, like traders, needed sturdy vessels to navigate the unknown. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from the materials themselves. Trace elements in the clay reveal origins hundreds of miles from where the jars were buried, proving these cultures didn't just exchange goods, they exchanged ideas about death and the afterlife. Imagine a grieving family in ancient Taiwan receiving a beautifully crafted jar from a distant island, its design infused with foreign symbolism yet instantly understood. That's the power of a shared maritime tradition. Even the placement of these jars holds clues. Many cluster near coastlines or cave systems accessible by water, as if positioned to catch the same currents that brought their ancestors to these shores. Some scholars believe the boat designs weren't just artistic choices, they were maps guiding spirits back to ancestral homelands across the sea. Others see them as protective charms, ensuring safe passage through the storms of the afterlife. What emerges is a breathtaking panorama of cultures united by the rhythms of the ocean. These jars weren't just containers for bones, they were time capsules of a seafaring spirituality that viewed death as another voyage, one last journey on waters both real and imagined. When we piece together these fragments, we don't just reconstruct funeral rites. We chart the soul of an entire region, written in clay and carried on the tide. Along the windswept coast of southern Peru, where the desert meets the ocean in a clash of sand and salt, The Paracas people crafted burials unlike any other in the ancient world, mummies wrapped not just in cloth but in entire stories. These vibrant, oversized bundles resembled cocoons, some towering taller than a person, their layers concealing bodies folded into the fetal position and swaddled in some of the most intricate textiles ever woven. But these weren't mere shrouds. Each thread, each knot, each splash of crimson dye was a message, a coded language of status, faith, and artistry waiting to be unraveled. Peeling back the layers of a Paracas bundle is like opening a time capsule of Andean society. The outermost textiles often burst with color, bold geometric patterns, fantastical creatures, even scenes of ritual dancing, all woven with precision so fine that modern experts struggle to replicate it. Beneath this dazzling exterior, more layers unfold, sometimes dozens deep, each fabric rank reflecting the deceased's importance. A high-status individual might be wrapped in cloth spun from rare Viking wool, dyed with precious cochineal and embroidered with gold. Simpler bundles tell quieter tales, farmers or artisans swathed in plainer weaves, yet still treated with profound care. What truly astonishes isn't just the craftsmanship but the intention behind it. The Paracas didn't see these textiles as decorations. They were armor for the soul, designed to protect and elevate the dead in the afterlife. Some bundles contain false heads, cloth masks stuffed with cotton, their faces painted or embroidered, as if to give the spirit a new identity for its journey. Others hide tiny offerings, shell necklaces, carved obsidian, or even bags of food, practical supplies for the unseen road ahead. Perhaps most telling is how these bundles mirror the landscape itself. The folded bodies echo the curves of the surrounding dunes, while the vibrant reds and yellows mirror the desert sunsets. Even the act of layering mimics the Paracas worldview, a belief that existence was stratified, with the mortal world just one plane among many. Unwrapping these bundles today, we don't just find mummies, we find a culture that wove their dead into the very fabric of the universe, stitch by sacred stitch. Just a stone's throw from where the Paracas bundled their dead, the Nazca people etched colossal designs into the desert floor, sprawling figures so vast they can only be fully seen from the sky. These aren't just random scratches in the earth. The Nazca lines form hummingbirds stretching over 300 feet, spirals aligning with solstices, and trapezoids that seem to point toward distant burial sites. Were these geoglyphs mere art or something far more profound? A celestial map linked to the rituals of the dead. The connection between the lines and Nazca burials is harder to ignore the closer you look. Many of the largest geoglyphs sit near ancient cemeteries, their pathways leading toward mummy bundles, not unlike the Paracas tradition, though often simpler in wrapping. Some researchers believe the lines acted as ceremonial processional routes, guiding mourners during funerals or annual remembrance rites. Others argue they served as astronomical markers, the trapezoids aligning with underground water sources, essential in this parched landscape, while animal shapes may have mirrored constellations believed to carry souls to the afterlife. One compelling theory ties the lines to the Nazca's ancestor veneration. Straight pathways radiate from burial mounds like spokes, as if channeling energy or offerings between the living and the dead. The famous astronaut figure, with its wide eyes and raised hand, might depict a shaman mid-ritual, bridging worlds during burial ceremonies. Even more telling are the artifacts found near these lines: broken pottery, shelled trumpets, and traces of ritual fires, hinting at gatherings where the living communed with the departed under the open sky. What makes the Nazca lines truly mesmerizing is their scale juxtaposed with intimacy. These massive earthworks required generations to maintain, yet their purpose may have been deeply personal, guiding individual souls through the cosmos just as carefully as the Paracas wrapped each bundle. Whether as celestial maps, processional highways, or giant prayer circles, the lines remind us that for the Nazca, death wasn't hidden underground. It was written across the land itself, a monumental testament to the bond between those who walked the earth and those who had taken flight. While many ancient cultures honored their dead with elaborate rituals, few practices evoke as much controversy as sati, the now banned tradition where widows would immolate themselves on their husbands' funeral pyres. Rooted in certain Hindu scriptures, this extreme act of devotion was seen by some as the ultimate expression of wifely duty, while others viewed it as a grim reflection of societal oppression. The earliest references appear in texts like the Mahabharata, where goddess Sati immolates herself after her father insults her husband, Shiva. Over centuries, this mythological act morphed into a real-life expectation for some widows, particularly among elite castes where it became a twisted status symbol. Historical accounts describe gruesome scenes: women dressed in bridal finery, sometimes drugged or coerced, climbing onto blazing pyres as crowds chanted religious verses. Yet the practice was never universal. Many regions of India resisted it, and reformist movements openly condemned sati as a distortion of Hindu teachings. By the early 19th century, British colonial rulers, pressured by Indian reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, banned it outright, but the legacy lingers in contested ways. Some fringe groups still glorify rare cases as voluntary acts of piety, while modern feminists highlight how sati symbolized the erasure of widows who are often stripped of property rights and social standing. What makes sati so haunting isn't just its brutality, but the way it reveals how death rituals can mirror a culture's deepest anxieties. In a society that idealized chastity, sati became the ultimate control, a woman's identity so tied to her husband that her life was deemed meaningless without him. Today, monuments mark sites where sati occurred, some worshipped as shrines, others standing as silent rebukes. The practice may be extinct, but its shadow prompts uncomfortable questions. When does devotion become oppression? And who gets to decide the meaning of a good death? One thing is certain: no funeral pyre burns hot enough to consume the complexities left in its ashes. In modern India, the echoes of sati linger not in practice, but in memory, etched into stone and woven into the fabric of cultural reckoning. Scattered across Rajasthan and beyond, tiny memorials called sati stones stand quietly in village squares, their carvings showing a woman beside her husband, one hand raised in a gesture of devotion. These markers are both tribute and Rorschach test, viewed by some as sacred relics, by others as grim reminders of a painful past. Local communities often tend to them with flowers and incense, while historians note how these stones became tools of social control in their time, glorifying an act that left women no honorable alternative. The portrayal of sati in films and literature reveals just as much complexity. Bollywood epics like Padmavat romanticize the practice as heroic self-sacrifice, framing it against sweeping scores and dramatic firelight. Meanwhile, novels like Mahasweta Devi's Draupadi deconstruct it, exposing the suffocating expectations placed on widows. Even the word sati itself sparks debate. Does it mean true wife or chaste woman? Or has its meaning been twisted to justify oppression? Scholars point out that ancient texts describe sati as voluntary, yet colonial records detail instances where women were pushed into flames or barred from escaping. Perhaps most telling is how modern India negotiates this legacy. Activists have repurposed sati sites as spaces for feminist discourse, holding vigils that honor forgotten widows without glorifying their deaths. Museums now contextualize sati stones alongside stories of resistance, like the 1987 case of Roop Kanwar, whose controversial death reignited national outrage and legal reforms. The practice may be outlawed, but its shadow still shapes conversations about agency, tradition, and who gets to write the script of a woman's life or death. What emerges isn't a monolithic narrative, but a mosaic of remembrance and revision. Sati's memorials don't just commemorate the past, they challenge us to ask who controls its meaning today. Whether carved in stone or projected on screens, these echoes refuse to fade quietly, each one a spark in the ongoing fire of cultural memory. In the tomb of Han Dynasty emperors, beneath layers of earth and time, lies a shimmering secret, an entire suit of armor not for battle but for eternity. These weren't crafted from steel or leather, but from thousands of hand-carved jade plaques meticulously threaded with gold, silver, or silk, forming a luminous second skin for the dead. Imagine the labor. Each suit required over 10,000 individually polished jade pieces, drilled with microscopic holes so fine that modern jewelers struggle to replicate them. For the Han elite, these weren't mere burial garments. They were divine shields engineered to defy decay and escort the soul to immortality. The choice of jade was no accident. To ancient Chinese cultures, this stone pulsed with mystical energy, a bridge between heaven and earth, capable of warding off evil and preserving the body's essence. Emperors like Liu Sheng, whose jade suit was discovered intact in 1968, believed the stone's cold touch could mimic life indefinitely, keeping flesh incorruptible until the soul awakened in the afterlife. Historical texts describe rituals where the suits were assembled like sacred puzzles, with each plaque's placement dictated by cosmic alignment. Gold thread signaled imperial rank, silver denoted nobles, while silk was reserved for high-ranking officials, a hierarchy preserved even in death. Yet the true marvel lies in the craftsmanship. Artisans used diamond-tipped drills to bore thread channels into the brittle jade, a process so precise that a single misplaced tap could shatter months of work. Some plaques were shaped like body armor, while others mimicked human features, delicate trapezoids for fingernails, curved segments for eyelids. When completed, the suit weighed as much as a small child, its weight symbolizing both the burden of power and the literal heaviness of eternity. Archaeologists uncovering these suits often find them surrounded by jade plugs, ear stoppers, nose covers, even genital sheaths sealing every orifice against spiritual contamination. It's a stark contrast to the naked exposure of sky burials or the communal ossuaries of Paris. Here, death demanded absolute containment, as if the smallest breach might risk the soul's voyage. The Han Dynasty may have fallen, but their jade-clad emperors still whisper a bold promise that with enough skill, faith, and luminous green stone, even death could be dressed for glory. What lingers most isn't just the opulence, but the paradox. These suits, designed to last forever, often outlived the tombs meant to protect them, looted for their precious threads, leaving scattered jade tiles like broken promises. Yet even in fragments they captivate, offering a glimpse into an empire that literally stitched its hopes for immortality into every gleaming piece. For all their divine craftsmanship, the jade burial suits faced an earthly threat more relentless than time itself. Tomb raiders. Within decades of being sealed away, many imperial tombs were breached by thieves drawn to the gleam of gold thread and priceless jade. These weren't reckless looters, but skilled professionals who knew exactly where to strike. Ancient records describe robbers tunneling through solid rock with vinegar-soaked drills to weaken mortar, or lowering themselves into tombs on ropes to avoid deadly booby traps. Their prize, not the jade plaques themselves too distinctive to sell, but the precious metals holding them together. A single suit's gold thread could weigh over 2 pounds, a fortune for those willing to desecrate the dead. The aftermath was devastating. Archaeologists entering ransacked tombs often found jade tiles scattered like puzzle pieces tossed by a giant, some crushed underfoot, others tossed aside in haste. One tomb near Loyang revealed thousands of plaques strewn across burial chambers, their threads meticulously plucked out. Yet from this chaos, modern researchers have performed their own kind of magic. Using historical texts and surviving intact suits as guides, teams painstakingly reassemble these jigsaw puzzles of eternity. A single suit might take years to reconstruct, with experts matching the unique contours of each plaque like forensic scientists piecing together a crime scene. Some discoveries border on miraculous. In 2007, a farmer digging a well in Jiangsu province struck something hard. a pile of jade fragments that turned out to be a disassembled suit from the Han Dynasty's twilight years. Though robbed of its silver thread centuries ago, every plaque remained, allowing conservators to restring it anew. Other suits weren't so lucky. The famed tomb of Emperor Wen near Xi'an yielded only a handful of jade pieces near his skeleton, just enough to prove he'd been buried in splendor before thieves reduced his armor to sparks of green in the dirt. The most poignant recoveries come from unexpected places. Jade plaques have surfaced in markets as far as Istanbul and Cairo, likely carried along the Silk Road by traders who didn't realize their sacred origin. Museums now employ specialists to track these fragments, using ultraviolet light to detect traces of original threading or microscopic wear patterns that reveal which suit a piece belonged to. It's detective work spanning continents and centuries, a race to reclaim shards of immortality from the shadows of greed. What emerges isn't just a story of loss but of resilience. These suits, meant to shield emperors in death, now guard something even more fragile: our connection to a world where jade could cheat death and where thieves couldn't steal the sheer audacity of that dream. Every reconstructed thread whispers the same truth: some treasures are too powerful to stay buried. Deep within the labyrinthine cave systems of Central America, where stalactites drip like stone tears and echoes carry whispers of the ancients, the Maya practiced a burial ritual unlike any other. Here, in the pitch-black recesses of sacred caverns, the dead weren't simply laid to rest, they were given passageways into Xibalba, the treacherous underworld where gods and spirits reigned. These caves weren't random holes in the earth, they were thresholds between realms, places where the veil between the living and the dead grew thin enough to touch. Archaeologists exploring these tunnels have uncovered chambers transformed into mortuary masterpieces. Skeletons lie curled in niches, surrounded by jade masks so finely carved they seem to shimmer even in torchlight. One famous burial at Acton Tunishil Mucknell in Belize revealed the remains of a young woman known as the Crystal Maiden, her bones calcified by centuries of mineral-rich water into a ghostly, glittering monument. Nearby, vessels filled with fermented cacao and obsidian blades hint at farewell feasts and bloodletting ceremonies, offerings to guide the soul through Xibalba's 9 layers of trials. The Maya believed these caves mirrored the cosmic order. Stalagmites became world trees, pools of water represented portals to other dimensions, and the darkness itself was alive with divine energy. When a ruler died, their journey into the cave was a reenactment of the Maize god's descent into the underworld, a symbolic resurrection waiting to unfold. Some burial chambers align precisely with celestial events, like the cave at Naj Tunish, where sunlight pierces the entrance only during the summer solstice, illuminating hidden murals of gods and ancestors. But these sites weren't just for royalty. Commoners, too, were buried in caves, often with humble offerings: a clay whistle shaped like a bird, a handful of shell beads, or a single jade pendant. The difference lay in scale, not spirituality. Whether king or farmer, every Maya soul needed the same thing: a well-marked path through the dark. What lingers today isn't just the artifacts, but the palpable sense of intention. Walking these caves, you can almost hear the chants of priests, the crackle of torchlight, the quiet rustle of a jade mask being placed over still features. For the Maya, death wasn't an end, it was a carefully mapped expedition, with every offering, every carved glyph, every drop of blood serving as a landmark in the ultimate journey home. Beneath the emerald jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where sunlight filters through sinkholes into crystal-clear waters, the Maya turned nature's wonders into sacred portals for the dead. Cenotes, those breathtaking natural wells formed by collapsed limestone, weren't just sources of water. They were liquid cathedrals where the boundary between earth and the underworld dissolved into shimmering blue. Unlike the dry, secluded caves reserved for elite burials, cenotes served a far more dramatic purpose: direct communion with Chok, the tempestuous rain god who held life and death in his stormy grasp. Diving into these flooded caverns today, archaeologists uncover chilling evidence of rituals that blurred the line between offering and sacrifice. Jade figurines, golden bells, and shattered pottery litter the cenote floors, but so do human bones. At the sacred cenote of Chichen Itza, dredging operations in the early 1900s revealed over 200 skeletons, many belonging to children and young women. Isotope analysis tells a haunting story. Some were local, others brought from distant regions, their deaths likely marking moments of drought or political upheaval. The Maya believed chalk demanded the most precious gift of all human life to summon the rains that fed their crops and kingdoms. Yet these sacrifices weren't acts of mere desperation. They were meticulously staged ceremonies combining spectacle with spiritual precision. Historical accounts describe victims adorned in ceremonial garb, sometimes painted blue to mirror chalk's divine hue before being cast into the depths. Some were tied, suggesting resistance. Others showed no signs of trauma, hinting at voluntary participation or ritual sedation. The cenote's acoustics amplified every splash into an echo that might have been interpreted as chalk's voice, a thunderous acceptance of the offering. What makes these watery graves unique is their duality. Unlike sealed tombs or mummified remains, cenotes kept nothing hidden. Bones drifted, artifacts settled, and the rituals remained visible beneath the surface, as if the Maya wanted their pleas to linger where earth and sky met. Modern divers still report an eerie sensation in these depths, a whisper of centuries-old prayers trapped between sunlight and shadow. For the Maya, cenotes weren't just burial sites. They were living negotiations with the divine, where every ripple carried a message. Life, even in its ending, could quench the thirst of gods. As night falls over a frozen Scandinavian fjord, the air fills with the scent of burning pine and saltwater. A Viking chieftain's funeral pyre crackles to life, its flames licking the hull of his warship one final time. Norse sagas recount these blazing send-offs in vivid detail. How the dead were dressed in their finest armor, how thralls and horses were sacrificed to accompany them, and how the fire's glow could be seen for miles across the water. Archaeologists along Europe's coasts have unearthed the echoes of these rituals, layers of charcoal-stained earth, rivets from ships melted into strange new shapes, and occasionally, the ghostly outlines of human remains reduced to fragments of bone amidst the ashes. The Gokstad ship burial in Norway offers a rare glimpse into this practice. Though the vessel itself was buried intact, forensic analysis revealed scorch marks on its timbers, evidence it may have been used as a funeral pyre before interment. Other sites, like the cremation cemetery at Lindholm Hoge in Denmark, show how fire transformed burial into something almost kinetic. Here, the charred remains of warriors were placed in stone ship settings, their ashes forming anchors for the soul's journey. The sagas speak of smoke carrying the dead to Valhalla, where Odin's ravens would guide them home. What set these fire rituals apart was their theatricality. A chieftain's pyre wasn't just destruction, it was a defiant celebration of life, with skaldic poets reciting verses as sparks spiraled into the night. Some accounts describe blood eagles performed on enemies as offerings, though scholars debate their accuracy. More certain are the artifacts found in the ashes: swords bent beyond use, shattered drinking horns, and amulets of Thor's hammer blackened by heat, all sacrifices to sever ties with the living world. The Vikings understood fire's dual nature. It consumed the body but also purified, transforming flesh into something that could cross between realms. A ship cremation wasn't an ending. It was a launch into the unknown, with flames as both destroyer and escort. Even now, when archaeologists sift through those ancient pyre sites, they're not just studying death, they're tracing the shimmering afterimage of a culture that met the darkness with light. As the last embers of the Viking funeral pyre cooled, the real celebration began, not with mourning, but with mead horns raised high and voices ringing across the longhouse. In Norse culture, death wasn't just a moment of loss, it was a gathering of stories, a feast to honor the departed and fortify the living. Imagine tables groaning under roasted boar, wheels of aged cheese, and steaming bread, all served alongside something even more nourishing, the shared memories of the one they'd lost. These funeral feasts, or eerie, were as carefully orchestrated as the cremation itself. The deceased's family would host for days, sometimes weeks, offering food and drink to everyone from fellow warriors to traveling scalds. Bread might be shaped like ships or swords, symbolizing the journey ahead, while honeyed mead flowed freely to loosen tongues and stir nostalgia. But this was more than just a party, it was a spiritual act. Every toast, every bite was a thread weaving the dead back into the fabric of the community, ensuring they wouldn't fade into oblivion. Storytelling played a starring role. Scalds would recount the deceased's greatest exploits, battles won, storms weathered, jokes that once made the hall roar with laughter. If the fallen was a chieftain, his deeds might be woven into new verses, cementing his legacy in Viking oral history. Even the seating arrangement held meaning, the high seat reserved for the departed, left empty yet symbolically occupied by their spirit. Guests would pass tales like platters, each anecdote adding another layer to the mythos of the life being celebrated. Archaeological evidence reveals just how central these feasts were. Excavations from Sweden to Iceland uncover animal bones split for marrow, remnants of massive cooking pits, and drinking vessels buried alongside weapons, tools for both war and revelry. Some sites show signs of ritual drama, like plays reenacting the dead's journey to Valhalla, blurring the line between performance and prayer. What made these gatherings so powerful was their duality. They acknowledged grief while refusing to let it paralyze. A Viking funeral feast didn't just say goodbye. It proclaimed that a life well lived deserved to be echoed in laughter, song, and the clatter of cups. In the flickering firelight of those longhouses, death wasn't an end, but a story waiting to be told again and again. In the quiet villages of China's Shaanxi province, red lanterns sometimes hang where grave markers stand, a celebration of love that defies death itself. Here, among the rolling hills and family plots, an ancient tradition known as ghost marriages persists, threading the line between devotion and controversy. For centuries, families have arranged posthumous weddings to ensure their unmarried deceased won't wander the afterlife alone, a belief rooted in Confucian ideals of filial piety and ancestral harmony. The rituals mirror living weddings in eerie detail. Matchmakers broker alliances between families, paper effigies of grooms and brides are burned as proxies, and even banquets are held to honor the union. But what happens when tradition collides with modern reality? In recent decades, reports have surfaced of grave robbers stealing female corpses to meet demand for ghost brides, particularly young women who died unmarried. Some families pay exorbitant sums for these illegal matches, believing they bring blessings to living relatives. The practice has sparked fierce ethical debates, with authorities cracking down on what they call corpse trafficking, while scholars argue over cultural preservation versus human rights. Not all ghost marriages are macabre. Some families arrange them peacefully, uniting long-deceased ancestors symbolically to honor old promises or heal historical rifts. In one documented case, two families reunited descendants decades after the Cultural Revolution to posthumously marry their grandparents, whose love story had been tragically cut short by political turmoil. These unions carry no legal weight, yet their emotional resonance is undeniable, a testament to how grief and hope can intertwine across generations. What makes ghost marriages so haunting isn't just the rituals, but what they reveal about our universal fear of loneliness even in death. Whether seen as sacred duty or ghoulish commerce, these ceremonies force us to ask, how far would we go to cradle our loved ones in comfort long after their final breath? In China's ghost weddings, the answer lies somewhere between red silk and shadow, where love and loss dance an endless waltz. Beneath the lantern-lit ceremonies of ghost marriages lurks a shadowy industry few dare to discuss, an illicit trade where bodies become commodities and grief fuels a booming black market. In remote villages and urban backstreets alike, a grim economy thrives, with grave robbers and middlemen trafficking female corpses to meet the demand for posthumous brides. A stolen skeleton can fetch thousands of dollars, especially if the remains belong to a young woman, considered the most auspicious for ghostly unions. Families desperate to appease restless spirits or secure ancestral blessings willingly pay these exorbitant prices, often unaware their loved one's final resting place has been violated. Police raids have uncovered chilling evidence: makeshift morgues stacked with exhumed coffins, fake death certificates, and even cases where hospital workers siphoned unclaimed bodies to brokers. The legal system struggles to keep pace. While China criminalized corpse trafficking in 2015, enforcement remains patchy, with loopholes allowing some to exploit cultural traditions for profit. In one notorious case, a grave robber confessed to stealing over 30 female bodies, selling them to families as far away as Guangdong province. Yet for every arrest, countless others slip through the cracks, their crimes hidden behind layers of secrecy and superstition. Not all participants are motivated by greed. Some brokers see themselves as fulfilling a sacred duty, connecting lonely spirits in the afterlife as their ancestors would have wanted. Others operate in ethical gray areas, arranging symbolic marriages with no physical remains, using effigies or spirit tablets instead. These variations highlight the tension between preserving tradition and preventing exploitation. The most heartbreaking cases involve living women, those with disabilities or terminal illnesses reportedly targeted for pre-sale before death. Though rare, these allegations have sparked outrage, forcing communities to confront how far tradition should bend. Yet even as authorities crack down, the practice persists, driven by something deeper than commerce: the primal human fear of solitude stretching beyond the grave. The tragedy isn't just in the theft, but in the unspoken dread that love, in death as in life, might come with a price. Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where towering kapok trees stretch toward the sky like ancient pillars, some indigenous tribes practice a burial rite as organic as the jungle itself. Instead of interring their dead in the earth, they return them to the canopy, placing bodies inside hollow trunks or upon wooden platforms high above the forest floor. This isn't mere practicality in a land where rivers swell and roots tangle. It's a profound reflection of animist beliefs, where every living thing pulses with the same sacred energy. The process unfolds with quiet reverence. The deceased, often wrapped in woven palm fibers or leaves, is carefully lifted into the embrace of a chosen tree, sometimes a naturally hollow morich palm, other times a platform lashed between sturdy branches. There, the body remains exposed to wind, rain, and the relentless activity of the rainforest's decomposers. Insects, birds, and time itself gradually reclaim the physical form, weaving it back into the ecosystem. For tribes like the Yanomami and the Sataray Moai, this isn't decomposition but transformation, a return to the cycle that sustains all life. Animism infuses every step of the ritual. The tree isn't just a vessel, it's a living participant, its roots drawing the departed's essence into the soil, its branches carrying whispers to the spirits. Some clans believe ancestral voices linger in the rustling leaves, offering guidance during hunts or warnings before storms. Offerings might be left at the base: a handful of smoked meat, a splash of fermented drink, not as grave goods, but as tokens of ongoing exchange between the seen and unseen worlds. What makes these tree burials so striking is their harmony with the environment. Unlike stone tombs or sealed coffins, they leave no scar on the land. A decayed platform eventually collapses, a hollow tree grows new layers of bark, and the forest absorbs the remnants without a trace. In a world increasingly concerned with sustainability, these ancient rites offer an unexpected lesson: that the gentlest farewell might be one where death nurtures life, and the boundary between the two dissolves like morning mist in the canopy. To witness such a burial site is to see the Amazon anew, not as a wilderness to conquer, but as a community where every creature, even in dying, sustains the whole. The trees stand as silent witnesses, their branches cradling generations of stories, their roots threading through memories as intimately as through soil. Here, the dead don't rest apart from the living. They become the rain, the fruit, the very breath of the forest itself. The towering kapok trees that cradle these sacred burials now face a silent crisis, their roots severed not by time but by chainsaws. As deforestation carves deeper into the Amazon, ancient canopy burial sites vanish at an alarming rate, taking with them irreplaceable fragments of indigenous memory. Satellite images reveal grim patterns, vast tracts of rainforest cleared for cattle ranches or soy plantations, often bulldozing trees that held generations of ancestors in their arms. For tribes like the Satare Moe, each felled tree isn't just lost habitat, it's a library of traditions burned to the ground. Archaeologists working with indigenous communities have documented heartbreaking discoveries. In one recently logged area, fragmented bones and woven palm shrouds were found scattered among tractor tracks, the remnants of a platform burial torn down mid-transformation. Without the protective canopy, centuries-old rituals are exposed to elements they were never meant to endure: scorching sun, torrential rains, and the prying eyes of outsiders. Even more devastating is the loss of intangible heritage, the songs, stories, and spiritual connections tied to these sites. When a burial tree falls, it doesn't just silence the dead, it severs a dialogue that sustained the living for millennia. The ripple effects extend beyond cultural erosion. These trees often serve as ecological anchors, their roots preventing soil erosion and their hollows sheltering endangered species. Their destruction creates a vicious cycle. As forests shrink, remaining burial sites become easier targets for looters seeking artifacts or land grabbers dismissing them as wasted space. Some tribes now guard their sacred groves with GPS trackers and patrols, but the battle feels unequal against industrial-scale logging, yet there are glimmers of hope. Legal victories by indigenous coalitions have forced some governments to recognize these areas as protected cultural landscapes, not just timber reserves. Ethnobotanists partnering with local shamans are documenting the spiritual significance of each burial tree, creating records that carry weight in courtrooms. And in quiet corners of the rainforest, new generations are replanting kapok saplings near surviving platforms, a living bridge between past and future. The stakes couldn't be higher. Every ancient tree that falls doesn't just take history with it, it unravels a way of seeing the world where death isn't an end, but a return to the forest's embrace. In the race to save these sacred groves, we're not just protecting burial sites, we're safeguarding a profound idea that humans belong to the earth, not the other way around. Rising from the emerald hills of Ireland like ancient sentinels, the megalithic tombs of Newgrange and Noath defy time with their silent, stoic presence. Built over 5,000 years ago, centuries before Stonehenge or the pyramids, these massive stone structures are more than just graves. They're celestial calendars, spiritual gateways, and testaments to the ingenuity of Neolithic engineers who shaped the landscape with nothing but stone, muscle, and cosmic precision. Step inside Newgrange on the winter solstice, and you'll witness a phenomenon that still takes modern visitors' breath away. As dawn breaks on the shortest day of the year, a narrow beam of sunlight pierces the tomb's perfectly aligned entrance, creeping down a 60-foot passageway until it illuminates the inner chamber in golden light. This wasn't accidental. The tomb's architects designed it with such astronomical accuracy that even today, after millennia of shifting earth and weathering, the alignment holds true. Imagine the dedication hauling hundreds of tons of stone, carving spirals that may symbolize life's cyclical nature, and engineering a structure that could capture the sun's faintest December light. But who were these master builders? The tomb's intricate corbelled roofs, each stone layered to distribute weight without mortar, reveal an advanced understanding of physics. The surrounding curbstones, etched with mysterious swirls and zigzags, suggest complex belief systems where death wasn't an end, but a phase in an eternal cycle linked to the seasons. Some theories propose the tombs were communal spaces for the living as much as the dead, hosting rituals where sunlight resurrected ancestral spirits, at least symbolically, once a year. What lingers most isn't just the how, but the why. In a world without written language, these people poured generations of labor into monuments meant to outlast them. The tomb's alignment with solstices hints at a society deeply attuned to nature's rhythms, where the sun's rebirth mirrored hopes for human renewal. Today, as visitors stand in that solstice glow, they're not just observing history, they're stepping into a 5,000-year-old conversation between earth and sky, mortality and eternity. The stones don't speak, but their silence resonates louder than words. Etched across the ancient stones of Newgrange and Noth, a silent language of spirals, zigzags, and concentric circles whispers secrets of the Neolithic mind. These aren't random scratches, they're meticulously carved symbols, some so precise they could have been drafted with modern tools. Picture an artist 5,000 years ago, chiseling under flickering torchlight, each curve a deliberate stroke in a cosmic message meant to outlast empires. The most iconic motif is the triple spiral found deep within Newgrange's inner chamber. Unlike simple decorations, these interlocking coils seem to pulse with intention. Some scholars suggest they represent life's cyclical nature, birth, death, and rebirth. Others see them as maps of celestial movements, mirroring the sun's path across the solstices. The theory gains traction when you notice how the spirals cluster near the tomb's sunlit winter solstice beam, as if marking the spot where light and stone perform their annual dance. Then there are the radiating circles, often called cup and ring marks. Found across megalithic Europe, these carvings resemble ripples from a pebble dropped in water, a possible metaphor for the soul's journey outward after death. At Noth, one massive stone boasts over 300 such symbols, their grooves worn smooth by millennia of touch. Were they ritual objects guiding fingers along paths of prayer? Or star charts plotting constellations important to the builder's afterlife beliefs? The zigzags and chevrons introduce another layer of mystery. Some archaeologists propose these angular patterns mimic river currents or lightning forces of nature that Neolithic cultures might have associated with divine power. On certain curbstones, they frame entranceways like energetic barriers, perhaps meant to ward off malevolent spirits. What unites these carvings is their synergy with the tomb's architecture. Spirals align with passageways, concentric circles mirror the mound's layered construction. It's as if the stones themselves were canvases for a unified vision where geometry, astronomy, and spirituality fused into one language. Unlike modern words, these symbols don't explain, they evoke. They don't declare, they invite. Standing before them today, we're left with more questions than answers. But that's the point. These carvings weren't meant to be read like a book, but experienced, a tactile, visual dialogue between the living, the dead, and the cosmos. In their silent eloquence, they remind us that some truths resist translation, lingering instead in the space between light and shadow, stone and story. High in the snow-capped mountains of northern Japan, where the air grows thin and the silence stretches for miles, a group of monks once pursued immortality through the most harrowing means imaginable. These were the Shugendo ascetics, warrior monks who didn't wait for death to mummify them. Instead, they transformed their own bodies into eternal vessels through a decade-long ritual of slow self-sacrifice, all while still breathing. This wasn't suicide, but sokushin, butsu, the ultimate act of devotion, turning flesh into statue through sheer willpower. The process began with a brutal dietary regime. For 1,000 days, the monk would eat only nuts, seeds, and berries, stripping his body of fat and moisture. Then came the next 1,000 days, a diet of poisonous yoroshi tree bark, the same resin used to lacquer bowls. This induced vomiting, sweating, and further dehydration, while also embalming the body from the inside out, making it toxic to bacteria and insects. In the final phase, the monk would seal himself alive in a tiny underground chamber, seated in the lotus position with nothing but a bamboo air tube and a bell to signal his survival. When the ringing stopped, his brothers would remove the tube, entombing him for another 1,000 days. If the body emerged preserved, not rotting, it was a sign of enlightenment achieved. Few succeeded. Of the hundreds who attempted Sokushinbatsu between the 11th and 19th centuries, only about 24 monks achieved the revered status of living Buddha. Their mummified remains, enshrined in temples like Danishibo, still sit upright in glass cases, skin stretched taut over bone, hands clasped in eternal meditation. Some wear delicate silk robes, others are coated in gold leaf, their faces frozen in expressions of eerie serenity. Visitors speak of an uncanny presence, as if these figures might open their eyes at any moment. What drove these men to such extremes? For the Shujendo, the physical body was the last obstacle to spiritual purity. By conquering decay, they believed they could remain in perpetual meditation, offering protection to future generations. Theirs was a paradox, using the body to transcend the body, embracing suffering to escape suffering. Today, the practice is banned, but the Sokushinbatsu monks endure as testament to a truth as unsettling as it is profound, that the line between devotion and obsession, sacrifice and self-destruction, is as thin as the mountain air they once breathed. The secret behind these self-mummified monks lies in a grueling science of self-preservation, a meticulous blueprint that transformed flesh into enduring relics. Their process wasn't mystical, it was a calculated assault on decomposition, leveraging diet, chemistry, and extreme discipline to cheat decay. For the first 3 years, monks adhered to a starvation diet of pine needles, resin, and mountain herbs, food so low in fat and protein that their bodies consumed muscle tissue, shrinking organs and eliminating moisture. This wasn't fasting, it was systemic drying from the inside out, leaving no sustenance for bacteria that cause rot. Then came the poison phase. Monks ingested toxic yoroshi sap, the same substance used to lacquer bowls, a ritual that turned their bodies into hostile environments for decomposition. The sap induced vomiting and diarrhea, further dehydrating tissues, while its antibacterial properties seeped into organs, effectively pickling them. Imagine drinking something so corrosive that it preserved you while you still lived, burning away fat and sealing skin like tanned leather. The final act was a burial alive in a cramped, air-sealed stone chamber where monks assumed lotus positions with only a bamboo reed for air. The underground space, lined with charcoal and salt, acted like a desiccation chamber, wicking away residual moisture. When the monk's bell stopped ringing, attendants sealed the tomb, leaving the body to dry in darkness for 3 more years. Success measured by resistance to decay was rare. Most corpses succumbed to putrefaction, but the few that emerged intact became venerated icons, their skin stretched taut over bone, joints still flexible after centuries. Modern forensic studies reveal just how precise this system was. CT scans of Sokushinbatsu monks show intact internal organs, their cells mummified at a microscopic level. Unlike Egyptian mummies, which relied on external agents like natron, these monks became their own embalming agents through sheer physiological transformation. Even their teeth retain enamel, a testament to the process's precision. Yet the true marvel isn't just the science, it's the willpower. These monks didn't merely endure suffering, they weaponized it, turning the body against itself in pursuit of something eternal. In their preserved forms, we see more than relics of faith. We see the staggering power of human discipline, etched in flesh that refused to fade. Beneath the bustling streets of modern London, hidden under layers of concrete and history, lie grim reminders of one of humanity's darkest chapters, mass graves so vast they swallow the concept of individual burial whole. During the Black Death of the 14th century, death moved faster than tradition could keep up. Towns and cities, overwhelmed by the sheer number of corpses, resorted to something previously unthinkable, dumping bodies by the hundreds into long, gaping trenches. At London's East Smithfield Cemetery, archaeologists have uncovered row upon row of skeletons stacked like firewood, a silent testament to the scale of the devastation. The logistics alone were horrifying. With as much as 60% of Europe's population wiped out in just a handful of years, there weren't enough living left to dig proper graves for the dead. Contemporary accounts describe carts piled high with bodies trundling through deserted streets, their drivers wearing cloth soaked in vinegar to mask the stench. Burial pits were dug hastily, sometimes while the sick still moaned in their beds nearby. At East Smithfield, radiocarbon dating and pottery fragments confirm these weren't just random dumping grounds. They were emergency measures sanctioned by authorities who had no other choice. Yet even in this chaos, flickers of compassion emerge. Excavations show that most bodies were placed carefully, arranged head to toe in neat layers, some even wrapped in shrouds or clutching personal items. A child buried with a small toy here, a woman with a pilgrim's badge still pinned to her tattered dress there, proof that even in the worst of times, someone still tried to honor the dead. DNA analysis of the bones reveals more than just cause of death. It tells stories of migration, diet, and resilience. Some skeletons show healed fractures or signs of malnutrition, hinting at lives already hard before plague struck. What makes these graves so haunting isn't just the number of bodies, but what they represent: a moment when death became so commonplace it broke centuries of burial customs. No tombstones, no processionals, no elegies, just a pit, a prayer if there was time, and the desperate hope that the next shovel of earth might finally slow the tide. The Black Death didn't just kill millions, it forced survivors to confront an unbearable truth that sometimes the only right left is survival itself. From the chaos of mass graves rose something unexpected, a quiet revolution in how societies remember the dead. Modern plague memorials aren't just stone markers, they're living conversations between past and present, where grief transforms into collective healing. Take London's Crossrail excavations, where archaeologists uncovered over 3,000 Black Death skeletons during construction. Instead of quietly reburying them, the city created a memorial garden at Charterhouse Square. Here, wildflowers bloom above soil that once held desperation, their roots intertwined with fragments of history, a delicate balance between honoring the dead and nurturing the living. Other memorials take strikingly contemporary forms. In Oslo, the Ekeberg Park installation features glass panels etched with names of plague victims, designed to catch sunlight like fleeting memories. Venice's Lazaretto Nuovo Island, once a quarantine zone, now hosts art exhibitions inside its plague-era warehouses, turning fear into creativity. These spaces challenge the notion that mass death should be hidden behind grim statistics. Instead, they invite visitors to touch history, quite literally in some cases. At Edinburgh's Covenanters prison, where plague victims were confined, you can press your palm against walls still marked with their scratches. What unites these memorials is their refusal to let tragedy fossilize. Many incorporate educational elements, interactive maps tracing the spread of disease, or sound installations whispering first-hand accounts from medieval chronicles. New Orleans' Yellow Fever Memorial features a fountain whose water pulses irregularly, mimicking feverish heartbeats. These aren't passive monuments but active teachers, using the past to spark discussions about modern resilience. The most profound lesson lies in their inclusivity. Unlike traditional memorials that often honor elites, plague sites acknowledge ordinary lives swept away indiscriminately, the bakers, children, street vendors who shaped cities before vanishing into trenches. Vienna's plague column weaves their stories into golden reliefs alongside saints, while Mumbai's pandemic memorial wall reserves space for future names, acknowledging that epidemics aren't just history. Perhaps this is the true legacy of those chaotic burials, a recognition that how we remember matters as much as what we remember. These memorials don't just mourn loss, they celebrate survival, turning ancient trauma into gatherings of light, art, and unbroken community. The stones may bear old dates, but their message is timeless. Even from the darkest pits, hope rises. On the vast, wind-scoured steppes of Central Asia, where grass stretches to the horizon like a golden sea, the Scythians built monuments to the dead that touched the sky. These nomadic warriors didn't just bury their fallen, they raised entire mountains for them. Known as kurgans, these colossal burial mounds dominate the landscape even today, some towering over 60 feet high. But it's what lies beneath the earth that truly astonishes. Treasure-laden tombs, frozen horsemen, and mummies whose intricate tattoos tell stories older than written history. Step inside one of these tombs and you'll find a world suspended between myth and reality. The Scythians buried their elite with staggering opulence, golden combs depicting battle scenes, weapons encrusted with turquoise, even entire chariots disassembled and stacked like puzzles. But the most striking discoveries come from the Altai Mountains, where the permafrost preserved bodies with chilling precision. The Pazyryk mummies, as they're known, wear leather boots lined with squirrel fur, their hair braided with felt and gold. One chieftain's body is covered head to toe in tattoos, fantastical elk, griffins, and spiraling patterns that may have served as a map of his spiritual journey. The real showstoppers, though, are the horses. Scythians didn't just bury their steeds, they mummified them too. Some kurgans contained dozens of animals, their manes still dyed vibrant red or blue, their bridles adorned with carved deer and snow leopards. These weren't mere sacrifices, they were loyal companions for the afterlife, saddled and ready to gallop into eternity. What makes these tombs so extraordinary is their duality. The Scythians left no written records, yet their burial rites speak volumes. Every golden stag, every tattooed curve, every frozen breath of a horse is a language without words, a nomadic empire's defiant claim against oblivion. To stand before a kurgan isn't just to witness a grave, it's to meet the past face to face, its eyes still wide open. Among the swirling smoke of Scythian funeral rites, one intoxicating detail rises above the rest. The ancient nomads didn't just bury their dead with horses and gold, they communed with the afterlife through clouds of burning cannabis. The Greek historian Herodotus left us a vivid account describing how the Scythians would erect small tent-like structures over hot stones, then hurl hemp seeds onto the embers. The resulting smoke, thick and fragrant, would fill the enclosed space until mourners emerged howling with what he called Scythian joy, a ritual cleansing that blurred the line between grief and ecstasy. Archaeology confirms these astonishing reports. Excavations of kurgans in the Altai Mountains have uncovered charred hemp seeds alongside bronze censers, their interiors stained with resinous residue. But this wasn't recreational use, it was deeply spiritual. The Scythians believed cannabis smoke purified both the living and the dead, carrying prayers to the spirit world while washing away the pollution of death. Some scholars suggest the tents doubled as sweat lodges, combining heat, smoke, and chanting to induce altered states where ancestors might speak through the haze. The most compelling evidence comes from grave sites themselves. The famous Pazyryk burials contained bundles of hemp plants placed near the deceased, possibly provisions for the afterlife journey. Even the horses weren't exempt. Their ceremonial blankets were woven from hemp fibers, as if the fabric itself held protective power. Modern experiments recreating these rituals reveal just how potent the experience would have been. When heated stones ignite whole hemp flowers rather than just seeds, the resulting smoke contains higher levels of psychoactive compounds, enough to induce the trance-like states Herodotus described. What makes this practice so fascinating is its duality. For the Scythians, cannabis wasn't an escape from reality, but a bridge to deeper truths. In those smoky tents, grief transformed into celebration. The living danced with memories of the dead, and the veil between worlds grew thin. Today, as scientists analyze those ancient hemp residues, we're not just studying a burial rite. We're inhaling echoes of a culture that understood death not as an end, but as a journey best traveled with open eyes and lifted spirits. On the rugged volcanic slopes of the Canary Islands, hidden within twisting lava tubes forged by ancient eruptions, the Guanche people crafted tombs as enduring as the stone itself. These indigenous islanders developed a sophisticated mummification process reserved for their most revered leaders, preserving chiefs and nobles in caves that doubled as sacred portals between worlds. Unlike the elaborate wrappings of Egyptian mummies, Guanche embalmers used natural desiccation to achieve immortality, carefully draining bodily fluids and packing the cavities with aromatic herbs and mineral salts. The dry, stable environment of the lava tubes acted as a natural vault, slowing decay for centuries. Spanish conquistadors arriving in the 15th century documented these practices with a mix of fascination and horror. Chronicles describe how Guanche mummies, called Zaxos, were seated upright in caves, their skin darkened by the embalming process, their faces eerily lifelike beneath headdresses of woven reeds. Some were surrounded by wooden effigies known as idolos, believed to guard their spirits, but colonial zeal soon turned these sacred sites into targets. Missionaries destroyed many mummies as pagan idols, while looters pillaged caves for Guanche skulls, which became morbid curiosities in European cabinets. Yet fragments of the tradition survived. Modern archaeologists working in remote lava tubes have uncovered mummies wrapped in goat hides, their hands still clutching obsidian blades or clay vessels filled with ritual offerings. Isotope analysis reveals some were transported post-mortem across islands, suggesting these caves were pilgrimage sites where the dead continued to unite communities. The most poignant discovery, child mummies buried with seashells and toy figurines, proof that even the youngest were honored with the same reverence as kings. Today, the few surviving Zaxos in museums tell a story beyond conquest. Their cracked lips and sunken eyes speak of a people who refused to let death sever their bond with the land. Each lava tube, each carefully placed stone marker, was a defiance of oblivion, a whisper from the past that still echoes through the volcanic silence. Centuries after the last Guanche mummy was laid to rest in a volcanic cave, science has unlocked a startling truth: their legacy didn't vanish with conquest. Modern DNA studies reveal that nearly half of today's Canary Islanders carry traces of Guanche ancestry, their genetic code woven into the living long after their burial rites faded into history. When researchers analyzed bone fragments from those ancient lava tube tombs, they found mitochondrial DNA sequences that still persist in the island's population today, a quiet rebellion against time itself. The genetic signatures tell a story of resilience. Some markers, like the rare U6B1 haplogroup, appear almost exclusively in Canarian descendants, acting as biological time capsules linking modern families to specific Guanche clans. Even more fascinating are the adaptations genes associated with high-altitude survival and lactose tolerance that hint at how the Guanches thrived in isolation long before European contact. These weren't just a people erased, they were a culture absorbed, their bloodlines surviving in the veins of farmers, artists, and fishermen who still call these islands home. Yet the DNA also exposes colonialism's complex legacy. While Guanche ancestry remains strongest in remote villages like La Gomera, where whistled language traditions echo their roots, it mingles with North African and Iberian markers, a genetic tapestry of conquest and coexistence. Recent studies even identified Guanche traits in unlikely places, from Cuban tobacco farmers to Venezuelan cocoa growers, carried across oceans during the colonial diaspora. For locals like the Heredia family of Tenerife, who discovered their direct lineage to a Guanche mummy through a saliva test, this science transforms history from abstraction into intimate truth. Their great-great-grandmother wasn't just a name in a ledger. She was a woman whose bones still whisper secrets to the living. The Guanches may have buried their dead in darkness, but their genetic light never went out. It simply found new eyes to see through. In the quiet countryside of Cambodia, where tropical rains wash over rice fields and ancient temples, glass towers rise like silent sentinels, each one filled with bones arranged with eerie precision. These are the Choang Ek memorials, built upon the infamous Killing Fields, where the Khmer Rouge regime executed nearly 20,000 people between 1975 and 1979. Unlike traditional burial sites meant to honor the dead, these glass stupas serve as unflinching witnesses to a horror that must never be forgotten. The towers hold more than 5,000 skulls stacked row upon row, some still bearing cracks from blunt instruments, a haunting testament to the brutality of execution without bullets. Below them, fragments of ribs, femurs, and vertebrae rest behind glass, exposed to the elements yet preserved in their rawness. Visitors walk past these displays on wooden pathways that wind through mass graves, where clothing, scraps, and teeth still surface after heavy rains. It's a burial rite unlike any other, not meant to comfort the living but to force them to see. Yet amid this devastation, there's a strange, solemn beauty. Local caretakers and survivors tend to the site with offerings of incense and flowers, treating each bone not as an artifact but as a life cut short. Some skulls have been carefully aligned to face the rising sun, as if granting them one final dawn. Monks chant sutras here daily, their prayers weaving through the glass, softening the horror with threads of reverence. What makes these memorials so powerful is their refusal to look away. They don't bury trauma, they elevate it, forcing confrontation with a past too painful to ignore. The bones don't just tell a story of death, they scream for remembrance, demanding that no one forget the cost of cruelty. In Cambodia, the dead don't rest silently beneath the earth. They stand tall, bones gleaming behind glass, dancing in the light, not as ghosts but as keepers of the truth. Across the shimmering waters of Cambodia's Tonle Sap Lake, the flicker of countless candlelit lanterns transforms the night into a sea of stars. This is Pi Chum Ben, the annual festival of the ancestors, where families gather to offer food, prayers, and remembrance to souls lost during the Khmer Rouge era. But these ceremonies are more than memorials, they're bridges between generations, stitching the living and the dead together through shared rituals that refuse to let history fade. At dawn, villagers carry steaming pots of rice and sweetened coconut milk to temples, where monks chant over offerings destined for hungry ghosts, spirits believed to wander during this sacred window. The air hums with the scent of burning incense and the rustle of bay leaves as families kneel before altars piled high with fruit and sticky rice. Unlike somber Western memorials, Pi Chum Ben pulses with life. Children weave through crowds with trays of treats, elders share stories of pre-war harvests, and young professionals return from cities to honor names they never knew in person. The rituals hold layers of meaning. Food isn't just left to spoil, it's redistributed to the poor, turning remembrance into active compassion. Traditional by Ben bowls, sticky rice mixed with sesame are tossed into the air for ancestral spirits to catch, symbolizing ongoing connection. Psychologists studying these practices note their healing power. By embedding grief into communal celebration, survivors transform trauma into collective resilience. In Phnom Penh's Choang Ek site, the festival takes on deeper gravity. Families light joss sticks beside the glass towers, their flames reflecting off skulls like echoes of extinguished lives. Yet even here, sorrow gives way to song. Folk melodies once banned by the regime now drift across the killing fields, reclaiming space where silence once reigned. For Cambodians, Pi Chum Ben isn't about dwelling in darkness. It's about lighting candles in the shadows, proving that remembrance can be both a wound and a salve. What makes these ceremonies timeless isn't their grandeur, but their intimacy. The way a grandmother's hands shape rice offerings just as her mother taught her, or how teenagers snap selfies beside ancestral altars, weaving old traditions into new stories. In a world that often asks us to move on, Pichum Ben whispers a different truth, that healing begins when we turn memory into motion and grief into gifts that nourish both the living and the dead. Beneath the turquoise waters of Micronesia, where coral reefs pulse with life and the ocean stretches endlessly toward the horizon, lies a burial tradition as fluid as the tides themselves. Here, the dead don't return to the earth, they become one with the sea. Island communities have practiced underwater burials for centuries, carefully weighting bodies with volcanic stones and ceremonially sinking them into the deep. This isn't a dismissal of the departed, but a sacred homecoming. The ritual unfolds with quiet reverence. Wrapped in hand-woven pandanus mats or placed in simple wooden canoes, the deceased are prepared for their final voyage. Stones, chosen for their smoothness and weight, are secured to the body not as anchors but as guides. Islanders believe these stones help the soul descend to the realm of ocean spirits, where ancestors wait to welcome them. Some legends say the stones themselves hold memory, carrying whispers of the living down to the depths. For cultures shaped by the sea, this practice reflects a profound connection. The ocean isn't just a resource, it's a living entity, a source of identity and myth. Some clans speak of spirits who navigate by starlight beneath the waves, leading the newly departed to submerged villages where life continues in shades of blue. Others see the sinking ritual as a symbolic release, like a fish returning to open water after years in a lagoon. Archaeologists have discovered burial sites scattered across the seabed, marked not by headstones but by coral growth and shifting sands. Unlike static graves, these underwater resting places change with the currents, as if the sea itself rearranges memories over time. Modern divers occasionally encounter these sites, where sunlight filters through the water like a cathedral stained glass, illuminating shells placed as offerings centuries ago. What makes these burials so captivating is their intimacy with impermanence. There are no monuments to outlast storms, no inscriptions to weather the ages, just the eternal rhythm of waves overhead. In Micronesia, death isn't an end. It's a slow dissolving, a surrender to the same tides that cradled the first canoes and the same depths that will cradle the last. But as climate change reshapes our oceans, these sacred underwater graves face an invisible enemy: rising seas and shifting currents. For Micronesian communities, the threat isn't just environmental, it's a cultural crisis unfolding beneath the waves. Warmer waters accelerate coral bleaching, destabilizing the very reefs that have safeguarded ancestral resting places for generations. Stronger storms churn the seabed, scattering carefully placed stones and remains, while acidification slowly dissolves the shells and artifacts left as offerings. The loss strikes at the heart of identity. These submerged graves aren't merely sites, they're living chapters of oral history, where each current carries memories and every coral polyp holds a story. Elders speak of spirits becoming restless as their sanctuaries erode, a disruption to the delicate balance between the human and aquatic realms. Fishermen report strange dreams of ancestors adrift, their voices muffled by the roar of changing tides. Scientists document the damage with grim precision. Sonar scans reveal burial canoes cracked apart by turbulent waters, their wooden fragments drifting into the abyss. In Palau, researchers discovered skeletal remains exposed by shifting sands, their volcanic anchors rolled away by unprecedented storm surges. Yet amid the devastation, communities are fighting back, combining tradition with innovation. Some clans have begun mapping burial sites with 3D imaging, preserving them digitally before they vanish. Others weave biodegradable mats designed to cradle bones even as currents shift, ensuring the dead remain undisturbed. The struggle here isn't just about conservation, it's about continuity. When the sea swallows these graves, it doesn't just take bones, it erases navigational markers of culture, severing ties between generations. But Micronesians aren't surrendering to the waves. They're adapting rituals, teaching children to read the ocean's new moods, and whispering to ancestors that even a changing sea can't wash their stories away. Deep in the heart of Europe, beneath unassuming chapels and quiet cobblestone streets, lies a secret world where death becomes art. The bone churches Sedlec in the Czech Republic, Evora in Portugal, the Capuchin crypt in Rome aren't mere burial sites. Their galleries, their walls adorned not with paint or marble, but with the very remains of those who once walked the earth. Skulls stare blankly from chandeliers, femurs form intricate geometric patterns, and vertebrae hang like ghastly garlands. This isn't ghoulish decoration, it's a medieval meditation on mortality, crafted with startling reverence. The story begins with something surprisingly mundane: real estate. At Sedlec, near Kutná-Hora, a 13th century abbot returned from Jerusalem with a handful of soil, sprinkling it over the abbey cemetery. Suddenly, this patch of land became the most coveted burial ground in Europe. As plague and war flooded the graveyard with bodies, the solution was an expansion. It was artistic consolidation. A half-blind monk was tasked with exhuming skeletons and stacking them in the ossuary, but what began as practicality soon blossomed into macabre creativity. Step inside Sedlec today, and you're greeted by a chandelier containing every bone in the human body, its chains of interlocked fingers swaying gently in the damp air. Pyramids of skulls flank the altar, their hollow eyes watching visitors pass. In Rome's Capuchin crypt, friars arranged their brothers' bones into intricate floral motifs, turning decomposition into delicate beauty. The message is clear: these aren't displays of horror, but harmonies reminding us that beneath skin and status, we all share the same fragile framework. Medieval Christians saw these ossuaries as equalizers. The grinning skull of a king sits beside a peasant's clavicle. A child's tiny ribs nestle near a warrior's weathered pelvis. In death, the social hierarchy crumbled like the bones themselves. Yet there's also hope in these arrangements. Many designs incorporate crosses or crowns, symbols of resurrection, a promise that these scattered pieces would one day be made whole again. What lingers isn't just the shock of bone against candlelight, but the care behind it. Someone polished these femurs, sorted these phalanges, arranged these scapulae into wings. The bone churches don't just display the dead, they honor them, transforming anonymity into artistry. To walk these halls is to witness a paradox, the most visceral reminder of our impermanence, rendered with astonishing permanence. Here, mortality isn't hidden away. It's polished, displayed, and yes, even celebrated. The bone churches of Europe may seem like macabre oddities, but they're part of a much deeper tradition, one that transformed our relationship with death into an art form. This was the era of memento mori, Latin for remember you must die, when skeletons danced across paintings, skulls adorned wealthy merchants' desks, and even the most extravagant jewelry held hidden reminders of life's fleeting nature. While today we often shy away from mortality, medieval and Renaissance Europeans embraced it with startling intimacy, weaving reminders of death into the fabric of daily life. Take the Danse Macabre frescoes found in churches from Paris to Tallinn. These vivid paintings showed skeletons waltzing with people from every walk of life: kings in crumbling crowns, farmers with rusted scythes, children clutching wilted flowers. The message was universal: death comes for us all, so live with purpose. Even personal items carried this weight. Wealthy ladies wore rings with hidden skull compartments. Scholars kept hourglasses on their writing desks. Poets penned verses comparing beauty to melting snow. What made memento mori so powerful wasn't its gloom, but its liberation. By staring death in the face, people found freedom in life's impermanence. A 15th century prayer book might feature illuminations of worms feasting on a bishop's corpse beside passages urging readers to cherish kindness over wealth. This philosophy reached its peak in the transi tombs of noble sarcophagi carved with two statues, the deceased in their prime atop the lid and a rotting corpse beneath. a visceral reminder that splendor fades but legacy endures. Modern psychology actually backs this ancient practice. Studies show cultures that regularly acknowledge mortality tend to foster greater compassion and present-moment awareness, the very lessons those bone chandeliers and dancing skeletons whispered centuries ago. Today, as we fill our lives with distractions from death's inevitability, perhaps these macabre masterpieces still have something to teach us, that remembering our end isn't morbid, it's the key to living fully. In the misty highlands of Madagascar, where the living and the dead share an unbroken bond, families gather for a ritual that would unnerve most outsiders, lifting their ancestors from tombs, dancing with their shrouded remains, and whispering secrets into the very cloth that holds their bones. This is Famadihana, the turning of the bones, a jubilant celebration where death isn't an end but an ongoing conversation. The ceremony begins with the crack of rum bottles against tomb walls, an offering to ignite the festivities. As the scent of spices and roasted zebu meat fills the air, relatives pry open family crypts with a mix of reverence and excitement. Inside lie the Razana, the ancestors, their silk-wrapped bundles cradled in layers of time. Gently, the living lift them into the sunlight, carefully unrolling the faded Lamba's traditional cloths. To inspect the remains, some skulls still bear wisps of hair, finger bones clink like fragile wind chimes. But there's no horror here, only tenderness as hands dust off decay and replace old shrouds with vibrant new silks. Music erupts as the rewrapped ancestors are hoisted onto shoulders, their parcels bobbing above the crowd like sacred cargo. Drums and wooden flutes guide the procession as families dance in spirals, their steps a joyful defiance of gravity and grief. Some weep, but more laugh, sharing gossip with the dead as if they never left, updating them on marriages, harvests, and scandals. Grandfather, your youngest grandson is marrying the blacksmith's girl. One might shout, pressing a kiss to the cloth. The roots of Famadihana run deep, weaving indigenous beliefs with Southeast Asian ancestry traditions. Malagasys see the dead as active family members who grow thirsty, cold, or lonely without periodic care. A 7-year interval between ceremonies isn't arbitrary. It echoes the time it takes for a body to fully decompose, releasing the spirit to the afterlife. Until then, ancestors linger nearby, hungry for connection. Yet this ritual faces modern pressures. Rising silk costs make rewrapping burdensome, and some Christian converts now opt for quieter memorials. Still, in villages like Ambo-Hijafai, Famadihana thrives. Its paradox is intact, a party that mourns, a burial that resurrects. As dusk falls, the ancestors return to their tombs, nestled beside bottles of honey and coins for the journey ahead. The crypt doors seal shut, but the message lingers. In Madagascar, love doesn't stop at death. It digs it up, dances with it, and wraps it in fresh silk again and again. But even as the drums of Famadihana echo through Madagascar's hills, a quiet transformation is underway. The ritual that has bound generations for centuries now faces a modern crossroads where urbanization and shifting beliefs are rewriting the rules of how the living commune with the dead. In the capital city of Antananarivo, high-rise apartments and hectic work schedules leave little room for week-long ceremonies. Younger Malagasys, drawn to Christianity or globalized lifestyles, sometimes view the practice through uneasy eyes, questioning its alignment with their new faith. The economics of tradition have shifted too. Imported silk for rewrapping ancestors now costs 5 times what it did a generation ago, pushing some families toward cheaper synthetics or stretching intervals between ceremonies. In rural villages, elders whisper concerns. Will the Razana grow angry if their cloth isn't changed every 7 years? Yet in the same breath they adapt. Some now blend Famadihana with Christian prayer, inviting priests to bless the bones. Others live stream the rituals for relatives abroad, turning physical grave sites into digital gathering spaces. Churches themselves are divided. While Catholic leaders often tolerate the practice as cultural heritage, evangelical congregations decry it as pagan idolatry. This tension plays out in quiet family debates. A daughter baptized in a Pentecostal church hesitates to dance with her grandmother's remains, while her uncle insists the ancestors' blessings brought last year's rain. Still, innovation thrives where tradition falters. Urban collectives now pool resources to hire traditional musicians for smaller, weekend-long famadihanas. NGOs document ceremonies as UNESCO works toward safeguarding the ritual, and in a striking twist, some diaspora communities host symbolic famadihana overseas, wrapping empty urns in silk to maintain the bond across oceans. The heart of the conflict isn't really about bones or beliefs, it's about continuity. As one village elder told researchers, we don't worship the dead. We refuse to let love become memory. Whether through silk or smartphone screens, famadihana endures not as a relic but as a conversation, one where every generation must decide how to answer when the ancestors call. From the towering Viking ship pyres to the sky-bound Tibetan burials, from the whispered conversations with Madagascan ancestors to the silent jade armor of Chinese emperors, what emerges isn't just a catalogue of rituals but a breathtaking mosaic of human resilience. These practices show us that death, far from being a uniform endpoint, is a mirror held up to the living. It reflects what we cherish most: our connection to nature, our hunger for transcendence, our terror of oblivion, or our defiant celebration of community. Consider the contrasts. The Scythians buried their dead with enough horses to storm the afterlife, while the Parakas wove their loved ones into textiles so vibrant they seemed to pulse with life. The Egyptians mapped the underworld with meticulous spells, while the Norse sent their departed sailing into flames with a laugh and a toast. Each culture, in its own way, asked the same unanswerable questions: what awaits us? How do we honor those who have left, and perhaps most poignantly, how do we keep loving when the body is gone? This isn't just history, it's a conversation spanning millennia. Today, whether we lay flowers at a graveside, scatter ashes in the sea, or light a candle in memory, we're part of that same human story. So we'd love to hear what traditions shape your understanding of loss and legacy. Share your stories in the comments. Let's marvel at the countless ways we've tried to make peace with life's only certainty. If these glimpses into the past have stirred your curiosity, don't miss our next journey into history's enigmas. Hit subscribe and join us as we keep unraveling the threads of time. After all, the past isn't just a place we visit, it's the foundation of every question we're still asking.